Bonjour. Welcome to the French News Network. Today we are joined by economic writer and thinker Lloyd Lamperouge. Now you hail from Corsica, is that correct?
Why, yes, it would be indeed. We've quite a lot of French history on the little island.
Yes. Before we get started on the French financial crisis, we need to go all the way back to the founding of the Eurozone, because that's where it truly started. Now could you give us a little bit of background on this?
Why, yes, of course. But, only because you asked so nicely. We shall begin in the late 1990s, when the euro was instituted across the European Union. Except for those English, apologies to the Welsh, Scottish, and North Irish, they always ruin the fun with their navies and not losing since the 118 Years' War. Though the initial value of the euro against the American dollar had brought rises to the average wealth of the general French citizen. Though it's worth noting, several people of extreme wealth live in France, which skews the average by a bit, and by a bit, I mean a lot. France is the leading European exporter of agricultural goods ranging from wines to wheat to the all-important cheese. Silly Americans think they can get a foothold of soybeans of all things.
Yes, with their debt currently around 1.8 billion euros.
But is debt really a bad thing, though?
Considering that it makes up 90% of our estimated GDP, I'd say it's a very bad thing.
It's only because of Greece. Ever since they, started plumbing down a fiscal cliff, everyone realized maybe, sophisticated countries with their sophisticated currencies, maybe can't pay back their sophisticated debts. Wanna know what else? The US once increased its debt by millions almost overnight. Wanna know what else increased with that? The well-being of their economy.
Speaking of debt, we have with us on the streets today Marie Corlive. Ms. Corlive is going to talk to us a little bit about how the current economic freefall is affecting everyday citizenship in France.
With the current economic stagnation, the artisans and shopkeepers have been hit the hardest. In the late 2000s, these middle-class workers were hit hard as a recession fell upon them. Every day we see more and more people on the streets and unemployment continues to rise. At just over 11%, that is a little more than 7 million without jobs. The competitive spirit once seen between small tradesmen and business owners is starting to fade. With the increase of products from Germany, China, and other Eastern Asian countries, these businesses are hard-pressed to make up lost revenue in the midst of a recession. Back to you, Nathan.
Thank you, Marie. Now, you said a lot about unemployment. Lloyd, how does this unemployment stack up against the rest of the world?
Well, besides the fact that even one person unemployed is one person too many, France is actually doing quite stellar these days. It's above places like Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Chad even. But in all seriousness, it could be worse.
Now, I think it's interesting that you mentioned unemployment on those terms because the unemployment rate in France could be seen as directly proportional to the decline that France is facing right now, at least economically. Now, I have some statistics here. And it says that, there's a copy there for you.
That, sir.
Yep. Now, in 1999, France sold 7% of the world's exports. But today, the figure is just over 3% and falling fast.
My, that's quite astounding, don't you think?
Yeah. The same high costs that are driving France into the ground are giving Germany, China, and other Eastern Asian opportunities a chance to multiply their exports exponentially. Now, in 2005, France's trade balance was a positive 0.5% of GDP, gross domestic product. But today, it just stands at minus 2.7. An excellent illustration of this gap is the chasm between German and French exports to China. Now, Germany exports, what would you say, $70 billion worth of cars, US dollars. Yes, US dollars.
Let me finish my sentence?
Yes. US dollars in cars. So they $70 billion worth of cars to China. That's 7 times the figure of France. France is only really sending $10 billion in not cars, probably agricultural goods.
Just on this very document you handed me, another factor that greatly affects the main reason for France's cost disadvantage is the burden of labor, a factor that typically accounts for around 70% of all corporate expenses worldwide. In France, the problem comprises of high wages, social costs, rigid laws, including a 35-hour work week that allows French employees the lowest number of hours worked in the developed world. Socialism, unfortunately, still alive in France, but I can't say it's doing well. People have begun to realize that austerity and socialism is nothing but a dead end.
What can the French people really do to fix this, though?
Well, first of all, you have to look at the very root of the problem. You see, recessions are a natural part, as so experts try to say anyway, a natural part of capitalism. You see, they naturally occur after a great period of growth. But when the recession hits, companies get scared. When companies get scared, they spend less, they invest less, they also pay for less. Because of this, we make do by making less products and providing less services. By not having any of these, employees aren't needed, so they're laid off. As the unemployment rate increases, companies even get more scared. Now the whole cycle just repeats again and again. What can the French do about this? Well, first of all, the government can increase spending. This might seem counterintuitive, but really, if companies are backed up by government spending and their funds, they begin to spend more again. By spending more, they make more products and provide more services. In order to do this, they need more employees. This picks up people off the streets and back into offices. As you can see, this vicious cycle goes both ways.
So now this totally contradicts the economic policy of austerity.
Well, yes it would. Austerity is not exactly the best thing the world has ever came up with. You see, it works by having the government reduce spending and increase taxes. If you're trying to be a capitalist country, you have to know that it's the driving force behind it is the consumers. And if you take money away from the consumers, they consume less. When they consume less, companies have less reason to make more products and provide more services. So that only exacerbates the cycle that I previously mentioned.
Now, keeping all of this in mind, what's in the future? What's in store for France?
Well, we may very well be looking at another series of revolutions. The French people have always been quite trigger-happy when it comes to events like Bastille and Louis XVI. But sure, may not begin World War III or anything, but like centuries before now, it's not impossible. The French people throughout history have rallied behind a single figure. Even people nowadays think of Napoleon as a hero. They're looking for a central figure of authority, and President Hollande, the current guy in office, with his disapproval rate at an uncomfortable at best 76%, is not providing that role. What France needs is a leader willing to abandon over caution and realize the best solution is one not everyone will agree on. That is the problem with voting. There are few candidates, and the voters don't know any better. An efficient autocracy should be chosen over an incompetent democracy at all times.
That's a bold statement.
Yes, I know, and unfortunately it's quite too true. Lacking that, France will eventually fall as the problem is only delayed by false promises and austerity, as France moves ever further to the left.
So, to clarify for our viewers, I believe that you're saying we really just need to increase spending. Forget austerity. Increase spending, boost our economy, get things going again, exports will rise, and we'll be in a better place in the world economy and in the Eurozone.
The problem lies in the fact that humans are humans and they have greed. Problem here is competition. You mentioned earlier, from Germany, Italy, anywhere else really. And you know what's the only way to curb competition? Well, two really.
What?
War and conquest.
Well, very interesting time today. Thank you for joining us on the FNN on the economic portion of tonight's show. Join in tomorrow as we talk about the economic troubles that large businesses face that are doing very well. They do face economic troubles. We'll talk about that tomorrow. My name is Nathan Pommier. This is Lloyd Lamperouge.
Disclaimer, I am not a communist.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow night.